Hearty shalom to you, Jeffrey Seif here. We're looking at the book of Hebrews together. Thank you so much for that. Something must have happened to you in your life that you would even find value in spending time in this life. The Bible Society, the Tree of Life, Bible Society, and the Tree of Life version of the Bible really subscribe to a scriptural verse that thinks there's life in the Messiah. That there's new life to be found. And that must be true of you, that you would go on a quest like this, that something inside of you would find value in scripture study. We're looking at Hebrews, and if you recall from last week, I lighted upon the fact that I find it interesting that there's a book in the New Testament called Hebrews. It wasn't called Greekru's, it's called Hebrews, because he's writing to Hebrews. Indeed, the first followers of Yeshua, of Jesus, were Hebrews. The gospel extended beyond Israel's borders into the heads and hearts of women and men of non-Jewish extract. But even if you look at those initial first impulses, women and men of non-Jewish extract were participating in a messianic experience. There is no Christianity to speak of as a religious system. Paul is out early advocating for a world where there's no mandated adherence to that which is put forth in the Mosaic economy for individuals of non-Jewish extract, and Christianity will find fertile soil for its emergence in that kind of story, but it's not an anti-Jewish story. That's amply attested here if you look at the reverence with which the author of Hebrews speaks about the world where he fares from and where his readers abide. He is seeing something in Yeshua that's greater than what he saw in the previous religious system and Jewish culture and religious experience. That's a fact. There's a kind of greatness. And he's early on in giving voice to that, notating in verses 1 through 4, particularly in verse 4, how the Messiah is superior to angels. The ancients believed in angelic visitation. It was part of the thought world, in fact, and he gives voice to the fact. In verse 5, he says, "Now look, to which of the angels did God ever say, 'You are my son, today I have become your father'?" And by the way, when we look at this father-son talk, we're harking back to language in the Hebrew Bible in 2 Samuel 7:14. You'll find in Psalm chapter 2, verse 7, and in 1 Chronicles chapter 17, verse 13. By the way, these references are notated meticulously in our reference edition of the Tree of Life version. That the author here harks back to the Older Testament and says, listen, therein you have this language, "You are my son, today have I begotten thee. And again, I will be to him a father, and he will be to me a son." And again, when he brings the firstborn into the world, he says that all the angels of God worship him. That he is just alighting upon the fact that in Scripture, there's this Son who is adored by heavenly beings, an attestation to the fact that this Son is greater than the angels themselves. Now, today, in the Jewish world, our Jewish friends will concede, yes, the Messiah is going to come and be a man and something of a great world leader, something of a sage. But there is no ascribing divinity to that personality. He's just a superhuman. Well, that's where we part company. And it's not just that modern Jewish experience parts company with me and with the author of Hebrews, but you can even go back into ancient Jewish literature. I'm thinking of the Dead Sea Scrolls in Qumran. In K4, 286 is this famous Son of God scroll. This is, if you look at the Essenes, this Jewish sect of literary experts and scribes, the community went from about 150 BC into the 60s AD, a little over 200 years of experience. And therein, they like this author, heart to the appellation, the description is used of the Messiah as the Son of God. He will be likened to the Son of God, Son of the God, Son of the Highest. That language isn't part of modern experience. Ancients understood there's the Lord, and then there's the crown prince, the great, that, it's not just an administrator. This is the crown prince. In effect, he's an extension of the king himself. I mean, that way of being God, the divine Son of God. The language wasn't as offensive to ancients as it is to modern people and modern sensibility. It's a way of bringing forth a kind of greatness. And I think the author of Hebrews is minded to do that. And I think those of us who are respectful of Jewish tradition, and I understand myself to be of that ilk, but even with that, I've had some experience vis-a-vis opening up my mind and heart and asking Yeshua to come into both. There's this kind of transformation, this being energized with something that's not just religious experience. It's something that's greater than that. It's greater than just tradition, as much as I am minded to be respectful of tradition. This author here gives voice to the fact that the Messiah who's come into the world is great, greater than even angels, that, by the way, were the object of attention and adoration in antiquity. Regarding the angels, he says in verse 7, he makes his angels winds and his servants a flame of fire. But regarding the Son, he says, your throne, O God, is forever and ever. And the scepter of uprightness is the scepter of your kingdom. You have loved righteousness and hated lawlessness. Therefore, God, your God, has anointed you with the oil of gladness above your companions. Kingly language there about being anointed. And of course, the term Messiah, Mashiach, is a term, the anointed one. In the Older Testament, prophets, priests, and kings were anointed. And here, there's a worthy king who's described, who is thus anointed. And this king is greater than angels, and this author is going to give voice to the fact that that king indeed is the Messiah himself. He closes in verse 13, to which of the angels, as he ever said, sit at my right hand, and I will make your enemies a footstool for your feet. He closes in verse 14, are they not all ministering spirits sent for service to those who are about to inherit salvation? Ministers, they are, these angels. The word angel, in fact, from the Hebrew malak, it means messenger. It's from the Ugaritic verb lak, which means to send. Someone, a subordinate who's dispatched with a message. They're there at the behest of a great. And this author, in looking at Yeshua, is talking about something and someone greater. I really hope you've experienced him, and if you have, keep nurturing yourself from the biblical testimony. If you haven't, why not now pray and ask the good Lord to come into your heart and give your life to him, get involved in a fellowship of believers, and see what happens from there. We'll talk about from there and see what happens. We need to get back to this in a week. Thanks for joining me on the journey. Jeffrey Seif here, signing off. Ciao.